Hey everybody. What's
Hi.
going on? How's your week going? Everything's good.
Whew. We're
I'm
gonna
a
light
I'm a little
gonna
punchy
light some
today.
sage. Good.
Girl,
Yeah.
I
This super moon, it's a snow moon tonight, right?
the
Me
moon.
It
and
So
is.
can we talk about it? Can we really just take some time to talk about the moon?
Hey, Celinda,
First
how
of
you
all,
doing?
Hi, Jazzy.
so the moon, I don't know if y'all have looked, but it's
It's beautiful.
ominous. It's beautiful, but it's ominous
So
though, right?
Mhm.
And as some of y'all, well, KG and Sarah, you well know, I had to hit up the Botanica
thank you for
today.
that.
Yes. To re-up on my Palo
Mhm.
Santo and my save
Yes.
and all that. So y'all shipments is coming soon. I'm gonna try to package that tomorrow.
Hallelujah.
Yes.
Wait, do you guys get it from Janine? Is that what you guys do?
I'm the
Yes,
pusher. I'm the pusher.
she is.
I'm the same.
She is. Yes, she is the sage pusher.
That
don't
is your
trust-
new
I
nickname.
don't trust nobody else
Yo,
sage but hers
I
because don't
went
nobody
to
else
the
sage
hood.
work.
Y'all
Okay.
hear me? I had to go to the
No.
hood.
You risked it
Miss
all for us.
Trinidad don't
I
teach
really did
kindergarten no
though.
more.
It
She
was a
teach
little sketchy.
witchcraft and wizardry.
I'm I had
Yes,
to go
Miss
get my agua
Trinidad.
de Florida. I'm about to mop
Nice.
when I get out of here. When I'm done with y'all, like it's a whole
Yes.
to do tonight. I'm
Yes,
feeling
you
witchy.
do.
Oh my God, y'all are too funny. I love y'all. So, let me. Can I mute y'all?
Let me mute my.
Y'all can mute y'all.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So tonight we get into the fun stuff. This is the session on personal branding and social media. I have decided for tonight to just really talk about it and take a little bit of a break from the whole presentation and PowerPoint stuff because, that gets a little tiring. So we'll mix it up a little bit. So yeah, the goal for tonight really is to just get your head wrapped around why we even do personal branding. And a lot of y'all know why, but it's still good to refresh and kind of talk about it. And also to kind of be thinking about what you're building, who you're building it for, and what you want it to do for you in the long run. So this will be the first part of that. And then Celinda and I recorded like a super dope session for you guys today because she was going to be doing the brand like a CMO, build like a CEO session, but she has a conflict next week. And I didn't want her to slip through my fingers because if y'all don't know, and if you haven't looked at her bio, she's worked for some pretty major brands. And so I really wanted her to kind of share, with us what are some of the lessons that we can be learning from big brands that we could use for ourselves because it really is quite similar when you think about it. It's just you're doing it on an individual basis. So that session, as soon as I get myself settled later, I will put that up in the drive so that you can watch it in advance of next week. And then I'm planning for next week to be more, I will do like a short talk, but I want it to be more Q&A based on what you watch with Celinda. And also I had sent out the post session homework. So based on, what comes up for you while you're doing that. So we'll make it more Q&A next week and kind of get some questions answered. So I'll just give a little bit of a story because I don't think everybody on the call knows, but I started, my own personal branding journey back in 2011. And I did it, it was kind of done under duress, to be honest, because I wasn't thinking about it. Personal branding wasn't even a thing that I had heard about, known about, none of that. I basically was on social media because my job at the time said that's what we're supposed to do. Like everybody's doing social media now and we need to get on it. And so I got on it. I had no idea what I was doing, like literally no idea. And I just kind of watched. The first place that I landed was Twitter. And it was hard because at that time, it was really just a lot of celebrities and you didn't really know how to find communities on Twitter at that time. So it took me a while, but eventually I figured, all right, well, let me just like tweet out like HR tips. And so I started tweeting out HR tips. And the first person that noticed me, I don't know how many of y'all know him, HR folk, is MJ Carty, Michael McCarty from the UK. He was one of the first people that reached out and was like, I love your HR tips. They're super helpful. And it was like kind of through him that I started to realize that there were like more HR people. And it was just like, oh, okay. It's a whole community. It wasn't as many as there are today, but you know, it was a helping of people. And, you know, slowly but surely I started getting my footing. The way that I started building my brand, again, wasn't on my own. So the PR agency that was teaching my company at that time about social media, I know now in hindsight, they knew nothing either. And they paid a boatload of money to those people, but everything they said to do was just wrong. You know, basically what they were doing was early stage employee advocacy. And so their thing was, you need to go on social media, you need to talk up this employer, and you need to make people like it. I hated my job back then, like hated it, hated my boss, hated the company. They were making me sick. They were stressing me out. So I'm looking at them all sorts of crazy, like, how could you expect me to be on social media and say anything nice about you? So that's when I kind of made it about me. And lo and behold, as I was doing all those HR tips, I was approached by Toolbox HR to start blogging. I was like, I ain't got time for blogging. Like, who has time for this thing? But they convinced me and I started writing, and I didn't realize how much I was going to like the writing actually. And people started responding. So it was just like, oh, well, people actually care. Because I'm like, I'm just Janine Truitt. I run an HR desk. Like, who the hell cares about what I have to say? Like, literally. But people did. And I really never stopped writing. And it's literally through my blog that my business exists, that everything that you see me do today exists. So, you know, that being said, I started this, like I said, under duress, but the opportunity that you have currently is to really be much more intentional than I was in 2011 about what you're building. So it kind of goes back to one of those first questions that I had asked y'all, which was, you know, what do you want your legacy to be, right? It's an important question because your brand undoubtedly, if you do it right, will turn into a business. Like right now, Sarah's starting a brand right now off of her brand that she's had for years. She's got a business now. Kirsten the same, you know, started off writing and doing that sort of stuff. And now she has a whole business behind it. So it's a real thing. And the way that I see it is it's kind of like an insurance plan. I feel like, you know, specifically for women, it's an insurance plan for a stream of income if you use it appropriately, right? Because the job market is fickle. You know, one never knows what's going to happen, when you're going to get that layoff notice, or when you're going to find out your company, you know, has to go out of business or whatever. And like those realities 10, 15 years ago, it was like, you know, you were dependent upon your company. Everything was, I got to keep this job. What am I going to do? You know, how am I going to pay my bills? That shouldn't be a concern now. Like, I'm telling you that for real, for real. You should always have something in your back pocket that you can make money off of. And the way to do that is really to sprout a digital presence that can make you money, but also is a passion for you, right? So I think that's the unique piece. We all went into the job market when, you know, everybody was saying, you got to just find something you could do, find something you like, find something that's lucrative and pays you well and doesn't make it look like you wasted your money on your degree. Now it's kind of like, we've done that. We've done the jobs. For some of us, it's worked. For a lot of us, it hasn't. It's failed us greatly. And now it's like, what do I really want to do? You know, so like if you could see yourself 10, 15 years out, like what's the end game for you? and what do you want that to look like? And more specifically than that, now that once you figure out exactly what you want your life to look like and what you actually want to be doing or be known for out here as your work, what specific problem can you solve? So that's the problem that a lot of people don't think about. A lot of people are kind of like, oh, well, I'm just gonna, create a profile on Twitter, create a profile on Instagram, create a persona, and just go out there and blog or vlog or whatever you decide to do. And then, as they start putting in the effort, they're kind of like, well, I don't exactly know why I'm not getting traction, or I don't really know why people aren't paying attention. It's because you're not solving a problem for them. So like any business, you have to be able to manage not only being likable, being a brand that people respect, but you have to also be solving something for somebody, whether that's through self-help or helping them in their, their jobs or whatever. Like for me, it was being that voice, that echo in your head of the things you wanted to say about what was going on at work, but really couldn't say. So, that is kind of how I spearheaded my business, so it's you've got to be able to identify a specific problem or problems that you're willing to solve through your brand, especially if you're wanting that to be a business, because otherwise you're just an influencer, right? Which is a business in and of itself, but it's a slippery slope, because I've certainly seen many influencers that couldn't translate well to business and found themselves flopping. So, you want to make sure that what you're building could be a sustainable LLC or Inc. or whatever, you decide, non-for-profit. And so let's talk a little bit about logistics, because this is another one of my pet peeves and one that I've seen go wrong so many times. So it was highly unfathomable to me that people were actually sprouting brands, doing business with clients, and had no sort of LLC or business. That just doesn't make good sense, right? So at the point that you're deciding, like, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I want to be known for, there's a few things you need to be doing. One, you need to grab your domains right off the bat, because what ends up happening is you start creating this great brand that everybody starts to love. And then you decide, you know what, I'm going to make that into a business. And you go look for the domain. And guess what? It ain't there. Not on GoDaddy, not nowhere. So, and they're cheap, like legitimately. If anybody ever needs a code, I'm happy to send one along, because I'm always getting one from GoDaddy, and I'm so cemented with them that they give me nothing anymore. I have to pay for everything. So there's that. But, that is the first step. Always get your domain, grab your social handles. That's another thing. You think people are not watching you, but people watch very, very closely, and they will watch you build your stuff and be like, wow, HR Jazzy, yeah, that's a cool brand. I like that, right? And you have no domain for it, or you don't have your handles for it. They will go grab your handle and make you pay premium for it just because, and you will be in that position and not like it. So, again, making sure that you get your website up to par and getting even if you don't put anything or put together a website, is of no consequence, because that's a very long and painful project. I'm not even going to sit here and lie to you. I'm getting ready to do mine again for the second time, and it is quite the process. But at least you have your domain, you have your handles on wherever it is you want to be. Speaking of where you want to be, it's not necessary anymore, and Celinda and I discussed this in our discussion, to be everywhere, right? I would rather see you be 2 places and kill that than be everywhere and be lackluster. A big part of how you're going to build your brand and how successful you're going to be is going to depend on how consistent you are, especially in the beginning. Right now, because I've been doing it since 2011, I can afford to sit back a little, just a little, not a lot, just a little. I can sit back a little because people kind of know what I'm about. They know at some particular point, even if I haven't written, like last year, I ended up having surgery in May. And from May on, truthfully, I had no mojo, really. I had nothing to give anybody. So I don't think I wrote anything maybe till like the end of the year, if that. My numbers didn't really go down that much, but that's because my SEO is up, right? So I have so much content on the web now that people don't find it very hard to find anything I've written. And there's enough current content that it's kind of like, okay, she's still doing her thing. If, for instance, I was really sporadic over the last 7 years in putting out content and they could find maybe like 5 articles for me, people would be done and over with me. So, you know, part of the battle that you're up against that I didn't have when I started or when Sarah started is attention span. People's attention spans are like this, right? So you give them some great content today, and if you don't do it tomorrow, I bet you've already seen it on some of your sites. They'll stop following you. And you're like, really though? It's the kind of thing like you have to continue to feed the beast. But I will say this, it's not a continuous feeding of the beast. People get accustomed to your cadence. So you set that cadence, right? So if you say to yourself, I'm going to post twice on Instagram a week, and I'm going to put out 3 blog posts a week, stick to that. They will continue to follow you based on your cadence. But it's when you're like 1 post a week, then no posts for the next 3 weeks, then 3 posts another time. For most people, think about yourself and how you operate. It's like, I don't know when to catch her. I don't know when to catch her. I don't know when she's writing. I don't know when she's on her show. It's the same thing with Ask Arena Live. There are times when I'm dead ass tired and can't be bothered to utter another word, right? But people have come to expect that I'm going to be on every Thursday at 10 p.m. to do what I do. So I do it. Now, in the beginning, and this is another point I want to get to, in the beginning, I probably maybe had like 5 people coming to the show, right? So in a lot of people's heads, it would be like, why bother, Janine? And a lot of people will tell you, please know people will try to deter you and tell you, don't do it. You only have 5 people showing up. You're not making a mark. 5 people showing up, I ended up getting sponsorships by staying the course. I have a sponsor show coming up just next week. I ended up tripling that just last year. All of a sudden, I went from 5 to 20 to 100 people to 200 people to 300 people showing up to my show, depending on the topic, of course. But still, if I had given up because people were telling me, oh, you only have 5 people watching, I would have missed all the opportunity, right? So a lot of this is dependent on how much grit you want to put into this brand and how much you can stick with it, even when it feels like nobody's paying attention, right? Because what is it that you're really vying for? You're vying for people's attention. You're vying for their attention on your brand and hoping that eventually they're going to patronize you in some way and put some dollars in your pocket. My mantra is stay the course and show up, right? So I don't care if it's an event, a webinar, whatever. If 2 people show up, be thankful for the 2 people and keep the show pushing like you got 500 people sitting in that audience, because eventually it will be 100. It will be 200. It will be 500 people. It happens so quickly, right? When I first started Talent Think in 2013, I remember Sabrina Baker, some of y'all might know her. She was just like, I'm so proud of you for starting your business. And I'm like, yeah, we'll see what happens. I was like dubious. And she's just like, you have no clue how quickly this will take off. And I'm like, all right, yeah, we'll see. And like the first year was slow or whatever, but I mean, I had clients pretty immediately. So even that was shocking to me. By the second year, I was traveling, getting asked for speaking gigs. So it happens, but it doesn't happen overnight. And the ones that you think that you're seeing that are doing it overnight, they're either cheating the system, which does not last, it's not sustainable, and or there's some other thing going on. And that's a large reason why this exists. It's because really early on, nobody in our space, that HR space, was sharing knowledge. Nobody pulled a Sarah aside, me aside, and said, hey, this is how you can better your brand. This is how you get money. This is how you pitch. This is how you get speaking gigs. Nobody was doing it. It was all done in silos. It was done in these cliques. And it was like they knew who they wanted at the top and who they didn't. And who they didn't want at the top wasn't anybody that looked like me, wasn't anybody that looked like you, wasn't anybody that looked like Sarah, Celinda, otherwise. So that all that information about how you rise to prominence with your brand on social media was kept in a bubble. And so there was a lot of trial by fire. You know, it was a lot of just learning on the fly and then getting on the text thread and cussing because you out here shucking and jiving, you know, and making peanuts. And every damn time I go to one of these conferences, I got to hear about how a Tim Sackett or whomever is making 10 and 15 grand, right? For blog posts, for social posts on campaigns. And you're just like, what am I doing? What am I doing wrong? You know? And so after a number of years of those text threads, those angry text threads, I said, we got to have something for us. I've got to transfer the knowledge now that I've reached a point. I'm not where I want to be 100% yet, but I've done enough stuff now that I feel like, okay, it's time to pass the baton a little bit and tell people what it is, you know? So that, you know, that's another tie into why this all exists. But going back to the whole social media thing, you know, and just like from a strategy perspective, really be thinking about where your time is best spent and spend time there, right? If Facebook's not, if you try, for me, I had to try a little bit of everything for a lot of reasons, because when I started my business, nobody wanted to talk to me about HR. Let's talk about that. And we'll get into that. Everybody wanted to know how I built my brand. So my first jobs when I started Talent Think were PR jobs, managing brands, and telling people how I did it. And it was through that people were like, oh, but Janine, you do HR too. Uh-huh. Can I hire you for that? Sure. That's kind of why I'm here. But cool, you know, building the brand. So I had to go through the back door to get to what I really wanted to do. And I teach people how to use these platforms. So for me, it is always important for me to know if there's something new, I've got to get on it and know how it works. Otherwise, I can't coach my clients on how to best place themselves, right? When you're doing digital transformation projects, how do you talk to somebody about that without knowing what's new and how it works? But for you, if you're not doing that, start with one. You might just start with one or two, because the deal is every social media platform has a different voice you have to cultivate. So you want continuity in your story across all platforms so that no matter if I hit you on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, I feel like I'm dealing with the same persona. I feel like I'm getting the same experience. It's got to be continuity across the board, right? That gets pretty difficult if you don't understand how to craft your story for each platform, right? So like with Instagram, it's a lot of storytelling. It's the cutesy captions, right? It's either the quick captions or it's a lot of storytelling. You have to decide what end of the spectrum you want to be on in terms of that. When it comes to Facebook, to be honest with you, that one has evaded me. But what seems to work for people there is personal stories and pictures of kids with a mix of the things that they seem to be doing in business. And if you can mix that really nice in a pot and stir, people seem to like that. Facebook has never yielded me a whole lot. I'm on Facebook literally for networking, right? So I use Facebook as an amplification of my brand, but I don't use it as a brand builder, if that makes sense. So everything else I do is really focused around LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and then what I do on my video platforms, right? And then Facebook's just like a feeder, but it's the one I hate. It's the one I want to go away, to be quite frank. But it's one of those things, like, I know it works for you, KG. That's KG's thing. You see her over there pouting. Again, everybody has their thing. She does famously on Facebook, right? You and Tiffany Keel too. And she's not even trying. She's just being Tiffany. But she does great. Like, she will post some shit and it will be like 300 people liking her junk. I'm like, how? But for me, it's not where I started out, and it's not where I put a lot of effort. So I have to recognize it for what it is. So I use it as an amplifier. Twitter, that's my jam. Because back when I started my blog, it just was that quick shot to get people to get back to your blog, right? And to have some quick shot conversations, right? So my early days were spent amplifying my blog and on Twitter chats when that was a thing, right? And them Twitter chats built me to that over 9,000 that you see now. I promise you, just spending an hour on those Twitter chats and just showing my chops about what I knew, that is what was like everything. I would literally walk away from Twitter chats with hundreds of followers after being on there, just because I'd be on there just talking about what I knew, right? So, that's why you'll see my numbers are way bigger there. Instagram is another one I put a lot of energy in, largely because I like it. So I do marketing for companies. I like the storytelling. So it works. It's easy. There's not a lot of drama. It's a picture. You describe the picture, you put some meat behind it, and throw some hashtags on it, and magic, right? Still a formula I'm trying to figure out, because obviously they keep messing with algorithms and things like that. But that's where I focus a lot of my energy, is Twitter, Periscope for my show, and then obviously Instagram. Do not get bogged down in numbers. I repeat, do not get bogged down in numbers. So like 2011, everybody cared about numbers. If you didn't have 10,000 followers, 100,000 followers, people were like, I don't even know if I want to work with you. The early campaigns that I got to do, just having like anywhere between 500 and 1,000, most of them were unpaid at that time, right? Because the way that marketers and businesses were looking at it was kind of like, you don't have enough followers, you don't have influence, right? Everybody thought followers meant influence. What we found out, and what many of us already knew after meeting some of the players who had hundreds of thousands of followers, was that there wasn't much influence. And it took a few years for businesses to catch up and realize that just because somebody had a lot of followers didn't mean that they were going to actually get somebody to make a purchasing decision. So again, this is all business. We can talk all day about how cute it is to put together a brand, but if you're working with a client or a business as an influencer, or digitally through campaigns, there's got to be an ROI, right? And that ROI has to be that you're influencing people to make some sort of, take an action. Most times it's a purchasing action, but sometimes it's just brand awareness. Like the client that I'm working with next week, they don't have a whole lot of bandwidth and traction in the HR tech space. So we're doing more amplification of the brand and brand awareness versus me directing people to make a purchasing decision. Because for all of us who are in HR here, we know what that sales cycle is for purchasing things. So in all integrity for me, I could not sign on with them for a campaign in which I could offer them leads, not in good faith. And we'll talk about good faith and integrity in a second, but I couldn't in good faith offer them that because nobody knows who they are. And even for as influential as I am, that purchasing decision, knowing what that life cycle is from the inside out, nobody's going and purchasing their system because I say so. They'll go look, they'll go sign up for a demo perhaps, right? They'll keep it in mind when they're ready to make that decision, but they're not about to go purchase that system or any of their solutions until they're absolutely ready, because that's how HR rocks. It's a whole process, right? So again, you know, with your brand, just kind of backing it up, it's what do you want to do? What are you passionate about? What do you want your legacy to be, right? Who do you want to work with? Who's your ideal customer, right? And keeping in mind with that, the integrity has to be there for everything, right? So early on, people were, and still, you will have people who will take jobs, take campaigns like what I'm doing, and they will offer the client the world. The client will say, I need 100 people to come to my site, and I need to have X amount of people in my sales queue. And you will have people in our space who will tell them, and it's going to cost you 10 grand. And yeah, I can do all of that. And then what happens is nothing happens. No sales queue, no leads, no nothing. So a big part of you building your brand is understanding what is in your wheelhouse to do and what's not in your wheelhouse. And to some degree, you have to kind of straddle the line, because there are a lot of things I did in the past 7 years that I had never done before. I had no formal training. I'm not a marketer. I don't have a marketing degree. I learned it on the fly, but there's still something in my wheel, but I did know something about promoting an employer brand and helping people build that up from scratch. So I felt fairly confident I could figure it out, but I still had to know that I had the chops. If it's something completely out of my wheelhouse, I would rather refer that business to somebody else who can do it, rather than sit there and make the client believe that it's something that I have the ability to do, right? And that's something I've gotten better at as I continue in my business, is being able to be really, really laser clear about what it is I do and what it is I want to do, right? Because early on, you're watching people to the right and left of you, and you're like, well, they seem to be doing cool stuff. They seem to be going on trips. They seem to be getting speaking gigs. They must have a shit ton money. And they probably don't. I have found that out, right? And so you're just taking in all the clients and you're taking on all the jobs, and you find yourself unhappy and you wonder why. It's because you're not being specific enough about what it is you present to the market, how you're solving that problem, and you've lost the fun in it because you're just taking everything. Now that I am so laser focused on what it is that I do and the value add, I can peacefully tell somebody, I'm glad that you reached out to me, but I think this person is better suited, right? They'll always try to bring me full circle, like, no, I want to work with you. But if it's not something in my wheelhouse, I don't have time to waste on it, right? Because I have a brand. I've built up a community of people who have come to rely on me for my expertise in certain areas. And that's the sell, right? So it's not so much about you having a gazillion followers. It's that you end up cultivating this base that you can move in one way or another based on your say-so. That's the goal. Ultimately, that's the goal. So yeah, personal branding in a lot of ways, and what I encourage a lot of my clients to do is really to think about the 2 to 3 or 4 brands that every time you see it, you're like, take all my money. Take every single coin that's in my pocket, just take it, right? And why do I say that? Because there's something visceral about that brand that makes you want to give them all your coins. There's something about that brand that perks you up every time you see it. It's something, and I don't mean just big brands, I mean even people, right? There's something about that person that every time you see a post of theirs or something coming out of their camp, it's like, wow, it left some sort of impression with me. That's the way you need to be thinking about your brand, right? People, again, attention span isn't there. So if you're not leaving an emotion with them, or you're not provoking thought, or you're not solving a problem through your product that is solving a problem in turn for your ideal client, you are as good as forgotten. All your efforts. You can be posting 5 times a day, 10 times a day. It won't make a difference. People need to connect with not only who you are, but what your brand is about. And once you can connect those things, the emotion, so that, you know, I know with Sarah, if you see something coming off the buzz of HR, you know it's going to be some hot stuff. You know it's going to be some pop culture something. If I know something's coming out of Kirsten's camp, you know it's going to have some hip hop, something kind of twist on it. Like it's going, you know, right? That's it. You have to be able to evoke that motion. I'm super brainy. I'm known for being brainy. People love that shit. That's what I'm known for. I will sit here and talk to you about human factors and existential stuff till the cows come home. And it makes me happy. And people love it. It's a certain group of people, but they love it, right? That's what I'm known for. You want it so that when you step on the scene, I realized that I was making an impact when I started going to conferences and people didn't even know me by my birth name. They didn't even know me by my government. They were like, so you know Janine Truitt, right? And they'd be like, Czarina of HR. Oh my God. Yes, of course. Like, you know, so it was like, wait, hold up. Y'all know my real name, but you know me as the Czarina of HR. But I had to step back and realize that my brand had done its job, right? So my brand had done its job, because as soon as they heard Czarina of HR, the aristocracy of HR, they knew exactly who I was and what I was about. They may not have known my government, but it was okay. That was something I had to kind of, you know, the last few years kind of start to help people understand, like, okay, yeah, I'm the Czarina of HR. Yes, I write for the aristocracy of HR, but who is Janine? You know, who is Janine, and how does it all connect? And that's been my job. That's been kind of my focus for the last few years, is to let a little bit more of me shine through, instead of just being the Czarina, you know, because part of what happens is, and it was no fault of my own or anybody that started brands back then, but there was a sharp line between what was acceptable professionally and what was acceptable in your social personal life. And there was like just that real sharp line. And so because I wanted to expose corporate America for the filth and read them for filth, I had to write under Czarina of HR. And that's how I started. So nobody knew my name initially. I was just this person, just like I didn't know who Sarah was. I didn't know what she was. I was like, is it a man? Is it a woman? I don't know. But Zaruni, like, what is she? When I found out she was a woman and a Black woman at that, I was like, yes, Lord. But that's what it was. The messaging back then was professional on social media, because you don't want your employer to say anything or whatever. And so anything back around 2012, whatever, was very, very like centered around my kids. I wasn't really too out there about anything personal. Then the whole NLRB stuff happened, and that kind of opened up the floodgates a bit, because they were like, nope, you can't touch that. Matter of fact, don't even try, because we'll come for you. And truthfully, one of my employees, my last employer, in fact, I'd written something for ERE, and it was like a tongue-in-cheek article about, you know, things that piss recruiters off. And it went wild. Like, it was my first article that I had like something like 7,000 retweets or some shit like that. It was crazy. I'd gotten up and it was pandemonium. And apparently it got back to my job that I had written it. And I remember my boss being like, you know, that article you wrote really wasn't kind of cool. And, you know, you should be careful about what you write. And I was just like, oh, she bugging. We ain't doing that. So, you know, I just told her, I said, you know, at no point am I about to start censoring myself in running my articles through you. Understand that. But I appreciate you. And I went and I spoke to an employment lawyer shortly thereafter. And I said, what can they do? I need to understand, like, from a legal perspective, what can they do? And he was just like, they don't even want it. They don't even want it. He was just like, don't even worry. But then I found out they had a conflict of interest form. And so what I did was I filed a conflict of interest under the blog. And then I assumed all these other things. There were things I wasn't even doing yet. It was kind of like, I'm going to write for the aristocracy of HR. This is the business. And under that may come consulting gigs and speaking engagements. I mean, I covered it all and submitted it. And look, I worked for the Department of Energy. So there's no conflict. It's just blogging. I'm just talking. So that got signed off on. So I share that to say, you know, if you're working in a company where it feels like you're in that battle, you have a lot more latitude than you probably think you do. It just takes for you to have some balls, quite frankly, and also know the law, and also have a lawyer in your back pocket so that people know not to come for you. Because what ended up happening is they couldn't touch me. When they thought they could or they wanted to touch me, they couldn't touch crap because I had it all. Speaking gigs, PR, media, I didn't have to go to them for anything. And people after me were the ones that had to go through internal comms and all this other nonsense just to put out a simple blog post. I was like, nope, you got the wrong one. So that's why when I left them, they were pissed because they couldn't touch anything that I did, nothing whatsoever. And so I encourage you, like, if you work for, even if you don't get the feeling that your company would do that to you, find out if they got a conflict of interest or anything, and just go ahead and file that real quick so that you're covered and they can never come to you and be like, yeah, you need to dissolve of that because now you're saying some stuff that's out of turn or whatever the case is. This is really not a whole lot they can do. The only way they can really peg you is if you're out there outright slandering the company, right? Like saying some stuff that's harmful, or you're leaking intellectual property or anything like that. But other than that, there's nothing they can do. People used to be all sorts of pissed because I would just write about a story that happened at work and I would change the names and slightly change the situation, and they knew it was them. They'd be like, I know that it was me that you were talking about. And I'm like, really? What are you talking about? They're like, Janine, don't play. I don't know what you're talking about because the story has said it was Jim. And yeah, you're a woman. So I don't know why you're upset. I didn't say Jane or Nancy. So you got to know how to game the system a bit and get done what you have to get done, because, you know, the content you will find, we've all been through it. There's a point in time where you just black out and there's nothing there and you're like, oh crap, what now, right? So, you know, at a time I used to kind of put pressure on myself to have to come up with stuff until I just realized, like, I got stories upon stories upon, I'm a walking storybook. Use that crap, right? So, you know, it's like, yeah, I could sit here and give you tips all day, but why not use what's at my disposal? So really be thinking about every aspect of your life, of your career, insofar as it pertains to your brand, and how you can kind of give that some life, because that's all I've been doing. And actually, my early days, I wasn't digging back far enough, you know, largely because I didn't think there were any stories there. But the more time I took with it, I'm like, oh, there's more and more stuff I can tap into. Like, there's the whole aspect of me. That's why now you see a lot of stuff I talk about is very psychological, very human natured, human factor, because that's how I started. And at some point I had to say to myself, well, why not touch on that? Like, why not talk about that? Why do the same old, which brings me to pivoting, right? So you may find that the brand you want to build, like I said before, is not the brand people want from you. which is going to leave you in a situation where you'll have to decide whether the brand people want is something you can offer and still be happy with, right? So like with me, like I said, people knew I was good at doing HR. They knew I worked in HR desk, but they were far more fascinated with how I built this whole persona of the Czarina of HR. I could have killed my coins in my business right then and said, no, I really want HR jobs. I said, okay, fine. I'll take your money and I'll teach you about how I did this. And eventually somebody will need some sort of HR something, and I'll segue into it that way. So, I mean, literally, I coached a psychologist on social media. That was one of my first jobs, and managed her social brand. And then my second job was managing a campaign for a children's book on candy. That's what I did. Like literally. But it, you know, at the time it seemed like this is crazy. I'm never going to spear an HR business, because then I did it so well. Other people were like, well, can you do it for me? Can you do it for me? But it all was connected. It all was connected. So even though I did that, I eventually got back to doing the work that I really wanted to do. And then I realized, like literally a year after that, there's an HR consultancy here, HR consultancy there. Why the hell does Janine Truitt need to be another HR consultant? For what reason? I had to sit back and ask myself, like, legitimately, do I need to be another person that can put an employee handbook together? Is that really doing the greater good, right? To do that? Or should I let those that are in the market doing it do that and spring something, like really go for the gusto, like really just spring for something I want to do? And I said, you know what? I'm going to pivot. It was risky because I had no idea how it was going to work out, but I decided to pivot. And that's when I decided I wasn't just going to be talent management or HR, put together anybody's employee handbooks. I was going to be a workforce planning, digital transformation, tech advisory firm. People told me literally, like, there's no way, you're doing too much. You're doing too much. How you want to do workforce planning and digital transformation and be a tech advisor? Like, impossible. But I'm doing it, right? So just be aware of who you're keeping in your circle and who you have here, because it's enough, as we discussed last week, the stuff we tell ourselves that tells you that you can't do it, or that it's impossible, or that you're gonna fail. Like, that's enough. To have other people around you compound that is just outright damaging. You've got to stay the course, and you've got to understand that it may take some people time, particularly when you're creating something new, something that hasn't been done in a space that just looks pretty uniform. You've got to stay the course. It's new. You got to get people to get used to that. And I did. I had to peep over and over again. What are you, a recruitment firm? Are you a headhunter? You probably should be a headhunter, because that's what you did before. You were a talent acquisition specialist. And why not do that? Because I don't want to, right? And part of the reason why I left corporate America was to use the full bandwidth of my talents, right? What really stifled me working for somebody was I wanted to do so much. And they say, yeah, you could do that. You could do that. And then they'd be like, yeah, pull up. We really don't want you doing that, right? Or we really don't need that, or we really don't have the budget, or whatever it was. So now it's like I've built a brand where I get to play every day doing the things that I enjoy, right? So I enjoy looking at a workforce structure holistically and forecasting for companies exactly how they need to be building their workforce and prepping them for the future. I enjoy that. It's needed. I am solving a problem, because most of these businesses do not know what to do with their people on today, nor tomorrow, nor yesterday. They just don't know. Not a damn clue, which is why HR is not going out of business yet, right? But a specific focus on workforce structures and how people need to be planning against how they plan to expand their business is a really specific niche, right? If a company has never been online and they need to go online now because obviously everybody has a digital presence and they don't have a clue, they've never done it, well, then digital transformation becomes pretty important. Having a bridge like me to tell them how to do it, how to take what they've done as a legacy company and put it online becomes pretty important. And then if they needed all of that and they realize, oh, I have no tech strategy, I don't know what we're going to do, I need to get an HRIS system, whatever the case is, it's kind of like, oh, well, I can tap into Janine for that too, right? So actually what I've created is a one-stop shop. Whereas other people would have had me think that I was creating something where I would have been doing too much, or people wouldn't have understood. People will understand once you understand exactly what it is you're doing, right? Once you are confident and you're like, nope, this is the problem I'm solving, this is what I bring to the table, and this is what I can offer you, you're off to the races. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks, right? What matters is when that client puts those dollars in, those first bit of dollars in your account, and you're on your knees like, yes, Jesus. Listen, mark my words, there is no better feeling in the world than when you bring in your first bit of money after you have effectively put together a proposal, pitched, and had the discussions, and that money hits your account. You like, yes, Lord, yes. I mean, I was like on my knees crying the first time that happened, because think about it. You go to work, you punch a clock. Somebody sits up in the ivory tower doing all of that, right? And ultimately, everything you contribute on every day, that money goes into that person in the ivory tower's pocket. That's what gets them on trips to Croatia, on catamarans in the Bahamas, off in Necker Island, butt naked, having a ball. Yes, you contribute to that. Yes. Oh, yes. Trust. Okay. You're contributing to that. Why not take some of all that energy that you have, that you're putting into them, and take, listen, an hour a day. An hour a day is 7 hours a week, right? Times that by a month, times that by a year. Little by little, you put it together. It's not a race, a marathon, little by little, and you will see where you are a year from now towards your goal, right? It's not about keeping up with who's doing what out here. Who cares? Like we discussed last week, who really cares? When you shut your eyes at the end of the day, when the Lord or whomever you believe in calls you home, all you're going to do is run script on what you did. What did I do? How did I treat people? How did I treat myself? What sort of legacy am I leaving behind? Are my kids proud of me? And then the eyes shut and you go, right? Who cares? However long it takes you. I know what it's like to build a brand while working. I was working like 80 hours. It was retarded. But if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have what I have. There is a certain amount of grit you have to put into it. So you got to set your mind up to say, I'm doing this, right? Even if it's going to take me an extra 10, 20 hours a week to build it, I'm going to do that. I'm willing to put in that work because it's going to yield me these things, right? And then once you start to build something, you got to get out of your own way and get out there and start talking about it and tell people, because nobody knows, right? Nobody knows you exist unless you're out there networking or talking about it, and talking about it to other people in professional sessions or social situations. It gets you to hone your stick, right? Your stick doesn't get honed up here. It gets honed. I realized that it got honed as people started to ask me more questions. So I go to a networking event. Oh, who you are? What do you work? Who do you work for? It was through those conversations that I started to hear myself talking about Talent Think and realizing what I liked to say about it, what didn't sound as great, what didn't really resonate, what did resonate. So, you know, it's the building, it's the incubation. Let's just go back. incubate an idea, right? Your idea, whatever that is. It could be a few ideas. Get it down on a white paper, get it down in a notebook, however you document that, and start incubating that idea and really start thinking about, okay, how do I make this happen? Is it solving a problem? Is it something I'm truthfully passionate about? Can I be seeing myself doing this a year down the line, 5 years down the line? Cool. Once you realize that that's the case, then you say to yourself, okay, what assets, what properties do I have to purchase in order to make this a reality? So then you go, you get your URL, you get your social accounts or whatever. You go to your state and you get your LLC. If you're really, really serious, if you know right now you're ready to spawn a business and you plan to take in money, get your LLC, right? Not an Inc. There was a period of time when it was kind of like, you know, you got to get an Inc. to look like you were somebody. The problem with Incs, I'm going to just full disclosure, is that you will be paying taxes even if you don't take money in, depending on your state. That's retarded, right? So to me, you get at least an LLC, and it's quite simple, right? Maybe like 150, 200 and something dollars through your state. You go do the business lookup, make sure that your name is there, and you know, get all of that solidified so that if you build this to success and somebody wants to put money in your pocket, you're legit, right? Then you go get yourself a little accounting system. I use FreshBooks, right? It's okay. It's just decent enough for me to put in some receipts and tabulate what I'm taking in. You want to make sure that you are not just building a brand, but you're running it like a true business, right? Because that's the goal. The goal is to make money. The goal is to have influence. The goal is to build it into something bigger eventually, right? And then again, you know, as far as from a marketing perspective, and we'll get into that deeper and you'll see more in the talk that I did with Celinda, it's really understanding marketing to the best of your ability and really having some fun trying stuff. Truthfully, that's what marketing is. It's being creative. Channel your inner child like to the 10th power. Remember what that was, to just simply color, paint, because that's just how creative you have to be when you're marketing your business. You have to be thinking of ways to get people to think like, wow, that was kind of cool. You know, like, what's a challenge you can come up with? What's a cool graphic you can come up with? You know, is there something, a specific series that you can talk about on your blog that might draw people in because it's topical? Like, you have to just kind of become an idea monster, right? And just get it out and start to kind of put them in some sort of order as to how you want to use that to amplify your brand. We all can market. If you're on social media and you've ever posted, just call yourself a marketer already, right? You might not be a good marketer yet, but you have the potential to get there. It's just coaching, watching what other people do, taking certain things. It's not stealing, right? It's not stealing to watch what somebody does that you admire and take kind of like their underlying mantra and say, you know, that's something I'm going to use. Anybody that tells you that they've never done that would be lying. They would be lying, right? Because none of what we do currently is reinventing the wheel. The stuff what we're trying to do for ourselves has been done by brands over and over again. It's the reason why you purchase goods. So the only difference is now we're applying it to individuals, right? So you have to be able to take what you've seen here with brands and bring it here, right? So that it's palatable. It's something people can sink their teeth into. And we'll get there. We'll talk more about big brands and the connectivity and, you know, just like kind of methods that you can use to, you know, start to think in that manner. One of the criticisms and compliments I've gotten is that I run Talent Think like a corporation, but it's an LLC. Gotten that a lot. There's a good reason, right? Because if I want to be big, if I want to be a corporation, if I want to be on that level, why would I run it like a small biz? Why would I run it haphazard? Why would I cut corners? what would be the purpose in that, right? So if your vision is huge, where you see yourself like on the cover of Forbes, you know, speaking at TED, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, then you ought to run your small business as if it's that corporation. It's called manifestation, right? So if I operate like that now, then nobody will have a problem seeing me as such. And it is so. It's evident by the brands that I've worked with, right? If I was just the typical regular schmegular small business, then I'd be getting mostly mom and pops. Yet I've worked with IBM, Black Enterprise, Oracle, big brands, right? There's in nobody's mind does it make sense that a mom, work from home mom of 3 should be working with brands like that out of her house. But guess what? I am the unicorn that business schools say shouldn't exist. And you can be that too. With a little bit of, you know, elbow grease and research and just putting a plan in place. So hopefully that was helpful. We're like 1 minute over. I want to be respectful of your time, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask because I have some time. Cool. All right. So I will put up this recording as soon as I feed myself because I'm famished. I'm ready to eat children, fingers, all sorts of things. So I'll put up this recording. I will also put up the recording with Celinda and I, and take your money. I will take your money. Yes, I will. So yeah, I'll put up the recording with Celinda and I, and then remember there's that post-session homework that I sent out. Really be thinking, you know, feel free to watch this again and really be thinking about what you want to put into that. And next session, we'll get into some higher level marketing stuff and kind of talk through some of, you know, maybe what you're seeing as obstacles to you getting exactly what you want, right? So that I can answer those questions for you and get you on the right path before we move on to other topics. All right. Thank you for coming. I'll see y'all online.